I'm Hayden Williams, and this is the Man in the Mirror podcast, where each week I talk to a guest about their life, about their work, and about those bathroom essentials that they really can't do without. It might be hair products, grooming, skincare, fragrance. They tell us about tips and tricks, what works for them, what doesn't, and how they feel about the morning and evening routines of skincare and grooming. This week I'm joined by Nick Carvell, who is a journalist who's written for many of the men's monthly titles. He's written for GQ, he's written for The Guardian, and currently he's also head of content for Walpole UK, who are the body that promote British luxury. Nick writes about fashion and grooming, fragrance, about design. I met Nick quite recently, and I was really keen to get him on the podcast because all the years he's worked in the media, he's obviously had a hell of a lot of products that have come across his desk, so he has a really deep insight to things that work and obviously more importantly things that work for him. So I hope you'll enjoy the podcast this week. Nick was a fascinating interviewee. I'll check back with you afterwards, but this is Nick Carvell on Man in the Mirror. Welcome along to another episode of Man in the Mirror, and this time I'm joined by writer Nick Carvell. Hi Nick, how are you?
Hi, very well, thank you. How is South London treating you?
It's treating me very well, thank you. You're a bit further north than me, but actually, when we spoke last time, you have this area of sort of edge of Kent, southeast London in common. Weren't you born around here?
Yeah, that's where I was born. My parents moved away relatively quickly because my dad's job transferred out to Japan, weirdly enough, just after I was born. So I never really knew it, and I've only gone back in later years.
I didn't know that. So how long did you spend in Japan?
I technically spent 2 years there, but of course the sad part is that my mum and dad always tell me these amazing stories about it, but I was obviously 0 to 2, so really don't remember any of it. My first memories are in the glamorous sort of Bedfordshire suburbs where I grew up.
I mean, it has a similar resonance and similarly exciting. It's funny though. I mean, it's a conversation for another time. But I've no doubt you've been back to Japan with work since then. But I spent 2 of the best years of my life, sort of post-university, mid-90s, teaching English in Japan, and I just fell in love with the country. And any opportunity, anybody sort of tells me about their time there, or they visited, or they like it, just gets me all excited and just start reminiscing about my time there and what lovely people they are and what a fascinating country it is. Have you been back with work since?
No, I've never managed to get a press trip to Japan. That would be the dream. I remember
that would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be so good. But the next time I see you, I'll bring along my. I've still got my learning to count to 10 in Japanese Disney book at home. It's my the only thing I really have from those days. I'll bring it along.
And can you still do it?
No.
Okay.
I don't think I can even do it at the time.
Because it was so long ago for me. Cause I'm a fair bit older now, but and I went as a sort of team. I was in the public school system, so I was a sort of team teacher. So I was engaged through the Japanese embassy. So I didn't necessarily have to have any Japanese language before I went, but I sort of picked it up and did some classes when I was there. But it's so long ago, and I wish I'd sort of kept it up. But the one thing sort of etched in my memory is this self-introduction that I had to do in different high school classes, and I think I could just about sort of pull some of that out, but it almost becomes like a kind of script, sort of little intro thing that you'd write on a blackboard. So I think I could remember that, but I wish I'd kept it up more. Anyway, but thank you so much for joining me, and I've really been looking forward to talking to you, Nick, because you're someone that lives and breathes fashion and design and grooming and men's products, and I think it'd be really good to get someone who writes for a lot of men's titles to talk about this area. And Man in the Mirror is all about talking to men and also finding out products that they really like and they really rate. But I guess I'd really like to know, first of all, what got you into writing and I guess writing in this realm of menswear and design and fragrance and grooming. Were you always wanting to be a writer? I suppose so. I guess when I went to school, obviously I really enjoyed writing in the sort of traditional subjects that you tend to do writing in, like English,
literature and history. But I suppose I never really connected that to a career.
Making money as a profession.
When you do those sort of tests at school where they tell you what your careers are, I think I mostly got you get kind of more corporate things, right? More traditional things. So I think I used to.
What did they suggest?
I used to get teacher, and I used to get architect were the two that always came through. Which, I mean, I would have loved to have been an architect. Actually, I'm hugely interested in design, which is why increasingly I tried to write more about it. But I never really considered journalism, and it never really came up. But I've always been interested in fragrance, and as you kind of guessed from the fact that my dad's job was transferred out to Japan. My dad traveled a lot for work when I was growing up, and often for quite extended periods of time to quite far away places. And he always used to bring me back those little sort of coffrettes of fragrance that you get in the duty free or on the plane.
Yeah, or the plane.
Yeah. And I have very, very fond memories of receiving those and being kind of obsessed with these tiny little bottles of fragrance. And, they were all, I was very, I was young in the 90s. And so it's all those kind of 90s fragrances that you think about now. It was all like, Cerruti 1881, Dior.
Fahrenheit and things like that.
Exactly, Fahrenheit, all of those. And I remember Acqua di Gio. And I always used to really look forward to that. And I in the bathroom at home, I used to have all these little tiny little bottles of these fancy fragrances, and always used to wear them from a very young age. So I was always interested in fragrance, but writing about fragrance, I suppose I never really considered as an option until I started contributing to the London Student when I was at university in the capital.
So you got into it that way through student writing.
Yeah, and it kind of came from that.
Amazing. And from writing as a student, was it sort of a natural progression into sort of men's magazines, or did you sort of regional papers, or what was the progression?
Yeah, I think doing the writing at the London Student kind of focused my mind into the fact that I wanted to go into the fashion industry in some way. And after university, I did a selection of kind of different internships, because at the time I didn't know whether I wanted to be on the PR side of things or on the journalism side of things. Obviously, both of which involve writing in a very different kind of capacity, but involve writing and storytelling. So I knew I wanted to be in that, but it kind of came down to wanting to be a journalist in the end. And that was basically because I did an internship at Esquire, which really kind of focused my mind on wanting to do that and wanting to get into men's magazines.
And I guess at that time, I mean, obviously there's still a massive, there's still an importance in those sort of key men's print titles. But I'm imagining, a few years back with, GQ and Esquire were sort of riding high, weren't they? And really sort of seminal and important publications. It must have been a fantastic place to work.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't there sadly, I never actually got a full-time job at Esquire. But, those couple of weeks that I was there were great. And yeah, I think especially as someone who, I didn't grow up in London, and I always saw London as this kind of very glamorous, cool place that I wanted to get to kind of as soon as possible, as soon as I graduated. And, men's magazines for me were kind of the epitome of that. Coming into, where I was getting into the industry was like, 2010, which was like the peak of hashtag menswear, like the menswear blog, menswear tumblers, like people being obsessed with the revival of suiting and Mad Men and, Chuck Bass being everyone's, style icon and Gossip Girl. Everyone wanted to dress like that.
Gossip Girl guy.
Yeah. So I think it was all very caught up in this moment where it really felt like an interesting time for being in menswear and being interested in all the facets that surround that. So, menswear and watches and grooming and pop culture. So it was fascinating. And I got really obsessed with it and decided that was what I wanted to do.
And I guess that, all those different areas you talk about, there's a kind of aesthetic quality, isn't there, to all of it? And I don't know about you, my entry point in via fragrance, you very quickly find that those interests in, simply as sort of smelling good suddenly then extends to, well, I'd quite like some of the grooming products or the wash products or shaving, whatever it is. You then up your expectations and the things that you want out of those products too. So I guess that's a nice segue into talking about some of the products that you really rate. What do you do for people who don't know your appearance? What do you do for sort of grooming and shaving? Do you have a beard, or do you shave every day? What about grooming products?
So I think for a for a person that writes about fragrance and grooming, I am not somebody that is necessarily. I very much enjoy my routines, and we will talk about that later. However, I'm not the most strict with my grooming and my grooming routines. So I generally have stubble. I don't tend to go for a full beard, mostly because my beard has a very unfortunate patch in it that even though I don't have a double chin, it makes me look like I have a double chin. So I don't tend to grow my beard out because it's just got a tricky patch in it.
A tricky patch.
So I have stubble most of the time, and I tend to trim that once every few days, and then obviously shave the straggly hairs that kind of crop up on my cheeks and lower down below, around my Adam's apple. So that's my sort of lower face appearance. My upper face appearance is I have quite dark hair, very dark brown hair that's just starting to go grey, and it's very there's not a lot of volume to it. It's very, very poker straight. I had a rather misguided experiment growing out my hair during lockdown, as many men I'm sure did.
Yeah, me too.
And I had this kind of image in my head. I'll say one of the things that I feel was a very important moment in my grooming history, and possibly my adolescent awakening when I was in my teenage years, was a fragrance came out called Crave by Calvin Klein, which is still, I will ultimately say, still one of my absolute favorite fragrances of all time. They've never brought it back. It was out for like a few years, I think in the very early 2000s.
I don't remember that one.
I've got a feeling that if you saw the advert and the bottle, you'd know it, but it's one of those ones that kind of, obviously like Calvin Klein put a lot of money behind it in the early 2000s, and it burned brightly for a little bit, but I was obsessed with it. It was in this like plastic, frosted plastic bottle with an orange kind of rubber squeezy thing on the side. I'm sure that Gen Z looking into it now, they'll probably revive it at some point.
Yeah,
very.
I need to Google it and have a look.
Aggressively millennial, but the advert for that, it was fronted by this model called Travis Fimmel, who had this incredible like shoulder length blonde Californian surfer kind of hair, and I was like, that is the ultimate.
I know what you mean.
Want. And so now I'm in my mid-30s. I was like, I've got to kind of dry and grow out my hair now, because otherwise I'm just never going to do it. And I grew it out, and it got down to my shoulders and did not look anything like Travis Fimmel.
You didn't look like Surfer Dude.
I did not. No, I looked. My hair, because it's so straight and so fine, it was very hard to get any sort of volume into it at all. So it just kind of hung around my face.
Right.
So my hair, I learned through that process, is just far better suited at being short than being long, because at least I can kind of blow dry and cheat my way to some like volume and interest in it.
Yeah. And so what do you use? What do you use in your hair?
Yeah, I've got to say, like, out of the whole realm of grooming and fragrance, I've probably tried out the most things on my hair over the years. Because I've always wanted to try and like get big Robert Redford in this 1970s hair, which is very
love story hair.
Yeah. But also, I'm firmly of the belief that, you should give everything a try once. I've done so much to my hair, sometimes in the name of articles, sometimes just in the name of giving it a go.
Why not?
Exactly. Like I've dyed my hair all kinds of colors. I've tried all kinds of styles and everything. But what I've learned throughout the years, there are certain things that work better for my hair and others that don't. And loads of those are to do with adding volume. And most recently, one of the most recent things I've discovered that's been very, very impressive is Kérastase Genesis Homme, which is a new range they've literally just launched. And it's a whole system that has 2 shampoos, a serum, a styling kind of clay. It's not a clay; it's much lighter than that, because it's all for hair that it's all for hair fall, basically. So it's all treating that and making it look like there is sort of more hair on your head, kind of instantly.
So you've embraced the whole range, have you? With that, you use all of those.
I've got the whole system, because I blow dry my hair pretty much every day, and I've learned some interesting tips about blow drying hair to get volume into it, and the fact that you shouldn't do it on a very high heat. You should do it on a low heat, low and slow, as opposed to high and fast, which I was definitely not doing before I kind of learned that.
That's really good. Good tip.
So that I use on my hair, and it's honestly very impressive. If any guy is in the same position as me, or concerned about hair fall, and they're seeing a bit more hair in the plug hole, as I will fully admit, I am in my mid-30s. I'd really recommend it.
That's great.
Also, in addition to that, I'm a big fan of Kevin Murphy's volume powder. Volume powder for anyone with fine, straight hair that wants to add volume is an absolute godsend. Like getting your hair dry and then shaking some volume powder into it and like messing it up. It's just an absolute game changer. And the final thing I'd say with hair is I've always been a big hairspray person, because my hair sort of drinks product. And then by the end, by the halfway through the day, it's just kind of all gone. Like any sort of paste or anything, unless I put something very heavy in, which I don't, because I have fine hair and it would just make me look like I'd permanently got out the bath all day. I'm just a big fan of hairspray. And honestly, like I've tried so many hairsprays in my time, and Elnett Supreme Hold is just it's just the best one that I've come across.
Yeah, the classic.
And you can get it pretty much everywhere. So the little black labeled Elnett is the best one. Although if you don't like the smell of it, because I know the smell of it could be a bit divisive for some people. It's got a very distinctive smell, especially if you're wearing fragrance. So they've actually released an unscented one now, which I use as well.
Oh, have they?
That's actually good if you're interested in your fragrance.
And what about skincare, Nick? What do you do? Do you have a sort of a morning ritual with skincare and then evening? Are there certain... Do you like to use a sort of range of products, or do you sort of vary it? Yeah,
so again, like I'm very lucky in that my career, I get to try out a lot of stuff, and I get to write about a lot of stuff.
That is lucky.
Which is, which a lot of people don't have, right? And and
it can be expensive, can't it? If you want to just try something out, and you've got to
exactly
30-40 quid on it or something.
Exactly. But what I will say is that. I've tried a lot, and I think that now when I recommend products, sometimes they're expensive and sometimes they're not expensive. But the things that I tend to talk about that I use myself that are expensive, that I now buy for myself, are things that I've genuinely been really impressed by and I think are worth the money. I don't believe in just spending money for spending money. But there are genuinely some things that I've put on my skin that I'm like, oh God, this feels good. This feels like it's doing something. In my teenage years, I had a lot of problems with my skin. I was very spotty, and I was on, pills for my skin, and I was on topical treatments for my skin, and I put my skin through a lot. And it's luckily in a position now where it's very happy, but it's taken a while to get there.
Much more stable now.
Yeah. But one of the things that I know is that my skin reacts badly in the way to certain products. And so I find that when it comes to moisturizers, my skin is much better suited to water-based and gel moisturizers as opposed to anything that tends to be cream-based. So I don't tend to use cream-based things because they tend to just sort of sit on my skin. I feel like I'm wearing a mask all day. And then I just get oily and it's just not pleasant. So when it comes to product, generally every day at the moment, I'm using Suzanne Kaufmann's moisturizing gel line M, which I'd really recommend. It's incredibly light and just kind of sinks into your skin, and leaves your skin feeling hydrated, but doesn't leave it feeling oily. It still leaves you looking matte, which is important. You
don't want that sort of glossy stuff that sits there too much, do you?
No, and also
sometimes it's doing good, but
yeah. Well, also with my skin as well, I just know that if I put something on that feels like it's kind of blocking my pores in that way, if it's like oil based or if it's creamy, I just then end up getting, even if it looks matte when I first put it on, I just know that in the evening I'll get home and I'll look all shiny and I'll feel uncomfortable, and that's not what I want.
Does that one have SPF, Nick?
It doesn't, no. So I have to put that on separately. But so that's what I put on in the mornings. In the evenings, what I tend to use is Chantecaille's Vital Essence Serum, which is also really great. It's one of those things that you put on. It's incredibly light. It's a clear gel. And it's one of those things that you just put it on and it sinks in immediately and leaves your skin feeling so smooth. It leaves it feeling like it's sort of been resurfaced. And then you just go to sleep. It's great.
Perfect.
So I let that do its work. When it comes to face washes, I've tried lots of face washes in my time, and there are 3 that I come back to. And those are Kiehls Bleu Herbal Astringent Cleanser. It's Neal's Yard's Rose Facial Cleanser, and I really love the Tom Ford facial wash as well. Mostly because it just smells incredible. And again, it's one of those things that you put in it, you wash it off, and your skin feels clean, but it doesn't feel like, sometimes you put on a face wash in the morning, you wash it off, and it feels like your skin has been stretched over your face.
Yeah, like you've stripped away all
exactly.
Of the goodness.
And those 3 are ones that your skin feels clean, but it feels like cared for as well. It doesn't feel like you've just stripped all the oil off it.
Yeah.
And again, those are like a variety of prices.
Yeah, some great suggestions. And what I'll do is put links to their different social channels on the show notes so people can check them out.
Another thing I'd add, if we're on face stuff as well, is one of my problems is occasionally I still, as everyone does, I still get blemishes. And a thing that I absolutely swear by now is a blemish gel that's made by the Organic Pharmacy, which is imaginatively just called blemish gel. But it's like a little sort of roll on. And if you, I find that if you put that on a blemish, like it doesn't clear it up absolutely instantly, obviously. But it really helps to reduce redness and help that blemish go down. And again, like I've tried a lot of spot treatments in my time, and that one, it just feels like it actually does something. And if you keep it in the fridge, it's actually really lovely just to roll on because it's like really.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a metal rollerball. So putting that on a very angry spot with like a heartbeat is just really
calms it right down. And do you have do you use any products around your eyes? Do you have any of those sort of roller balls for your eyes or anything like that?
I haven't used. I'm trying to think of what I use. So what? Yeah, again, I do like a rollerball. We used to have a jade roller that I used under my eyes, and that if you keep that in the fridge, putting that on with an eye gel is. I mean, I could happily sit there for 30 minutes doing that in the evening. And it's one of the most. If you're having an awful day, put some music on and put a rollerball, a cold jade roller with some eye gel under your eyes, and it's just one of the best experiences. However, I'm trying to think of what eye gels I have.
I mean, if it's not a regular part of your routine,
but it is increasingly important to me because I do feel like my under eyes are very, very delicate. It's the one thing I haven't brought into my room with me to.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
It's the one thing.
If you let me know, I can add it in the notes if there's some, because your recommendations have been so brilliant. So I'm sure people would.
I will go and get my one for my bathroom, and I'll go and tell you at the end.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
It's so great to hear about those products, and we met at a fragrance event, so I'm sure it would be very difficult to narrow down your extensive collection. But I suppose it's interesting to know how fragrance fits into your day. Do you choose something depending on mood or where you're going or season, or how do you select? Because I'm sure it's not just your one. I've no doubt it's not just a one signature scent, that you've got many in your range. So what's your relationship with fragrance, and how do you choose of a morning?
Yeah, so I actually do have a few fragrances that I absolutely love.
That you'll keep returning back to?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, I think, there's definitely something about how I'm feeling mood-wise for the day. There's definitely something about what I'm doing as well that will influence that. So, I tend. So I preface all this by saying, I think the thing that I've learned in my career that has been the most useful for me when it comes to fragrance is working out what you actually like. And I know that sounds
totally
reductive, but it's one of those things that I don't think you think about enough until you really start drilling into when you're trying out lots of fragrances. So, I mean, for me, I looking back, what I really liked from even my earliest childhood, going back to like Craven Cherokee 1881, was I really liked citrus-based, fresh, bright fragrances. Like, sure, in the 2000s, that was probably also tinged with a bit of like American sporty aquatic as well, which I still have a big soft spot for, though I don't have many of them left myself. Although that said, I do have a bottle of I bought my husband a bottle of Chanel Allure Homme Sport for Christmas this year as a bit of a throwback to both of our teenagers, which I do steal now.
And it still smells good.
It still smells great. It's still a good one. Great fragrance. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
But that now informs how I think about my fragrances now and what I end up with. And I think once you've done that, you become a lot braver in what you try. And I think one of the things that I have become increasingly aware of as I got older is that actually I like citrus fragrances, but I also really like florals and floral led fragrances that are, again, light and fresh.
Yeah.
And, we live at a time where, still so many companies pitch fragrances as quote unquote masculine, quote unquote feminine, and it's all marketing, and it's all to sort of push you in a direction, whatever your gender may be, and it means that you automatically start ruling out things that otherwise you would have tried. So I now tend to have fragrances. I tend to wear fragrances that I feel. I like them, but they're also not ones that are necessarily marketed in a gendered way. And I always encourage people to just, if they like something citrusy, just try lots of citrusy things and work out what it is you like in that citrus fragrance and kind of go with that. So, out of that said, I have certain fragrances that I always come back to. And those, there are two Joe Malone London ones, those being Basil and Neroli, which was a fragrance that is very important to me and very special because it's the fragrance I wore on my wedding day.
Lovely. It's a beautiful scent as well. Really good one.
Yeah, it's lovely because again, it's got both of my things in it that I like. Right, it's herbal and it's floral and it's also citrusy. So that's kind of like one of my everyday fragrances, alongside Joe Malone London's Grapefruit, which again I think is just an incredible, maybe a bit more summery. Like Basil and Neroli I tend to wear all year round, but Grapefruit kind of I save for summery, sunny days. And then the other fragrance that I like in the daytime is Hermes Eau de Narcisse Bleu, which is the one that I sort of pull out if I want to feel like I want to like impress people more that I'm speaking to, because you just don't find it as many places. You have to go and search it out.
I don't know that one so well. And the Joe Malone ones, I think, again, they're so great at citruses, but I don't know that one.
It's really great, and I think it's a case of like Hermes. Those kind of fragrances for Hermes, they don't really pitch in a gendered way, but I feel that because it's floral, it's very. But to me, it basically smells like. It's very hard to describe it. It smells like diving into. The feeling of diving into a swimming pool on a summer holiday. I can't really describe it. It doesn't smell like a swimming pool. There's something about it that you spray it on, you're just like, oh, I'm kind of on holiday. And it doesn't smell of swimming pool. It doesn't smell of suntan lotion. It just smells really bright, fresh, in no way sweet. It's crisp. It's like you're in the middle of, a meadow. It's incredible.
It's not much better than that kind of that holiday vibe and feeling relaxed and refreshed and
it's very. I'm in France, on a boiling hot day, and I'm staying at some sort of, in the middle of the countryside and going for a swim in a lake. It's that. I mean, it's very hard to describe, but honestly, if you find it, and they sometimes have it. They obviously have it in their stores, but they sometimes have it, I think, in airports if you're ever going past.
Okay.
I'd really recommend it.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying about sort of understanding a bit more about the area of fragrance that you like and is going to work for you. And I've also just a lot of the fragrances I gravitate towards are not, they tend to be more of the niche variety, not because there's any kind of snobbery about it, but it's just I like some of those brands and fragrances, but they're not gendered so much. And I have this real debate about it'd be so much easier if in stores in general they didn't have women's and men's fragrances. But I know that's it's not realistic, is it? It's like saying, well, why do clothes stores have different departments for men and women? But I think you're right. If you sort of throw off some of those shackles and just open yourself up to notes and raw materials, ingredients that you like, then there's so many fragrances that would that could work. But I think sometimes, I think particularly for men, I don't know, they're sort of scared to find out that information or sort of look into ingredients a bit more, and just there's that habitual thing, isn't there? Just keep buying the same thing over and over, or something.
Well, yeah, and I think
slightly, or flankers that are related to it, whatever. But there's so much great stuff out there to discover.
Yeah, and well, I think if you're coming across fragrance, I mean, the place you tend to come across fragrance the most are the places that stock fragrances that are very heavily marketed and very heavily gendered. But a lot of there are very few fragrance houses now that really gender their fragrances so aggressively. Like, it's very rare to see that at a lot of places. Like, so. I mean, I've got to say that one of the things that I've felt really helped me, and one of the things that I always recommend to people when I'm talking about fragrance, is Fragrantica, which I think is such an incredible resource, even if the only way you use it, like not necessarily for reviews, because obviously everyone's opinion of a fragrance is different. What I might like, someone else might not like. However, I think what it's incredibly useful for are the scent pyramids and the notes. Because once you look up a few fragrances and you're like, oh, well, the thing I actually really like in this fragrance that is in common with all of these is, I don't know, bergamot or amber or
tea or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or violet. You're like, oh, I really like these kind of soapy fragrances. Because there are certain things that people, I think, have complete stereotypes about and kind of avoid. The idea of like patchouli, has such a bad rep in so many fragrances.
It does.
However, there are a lot of very interesting fragrances that have patchouli in, and where patchouli is used very differently to what the stereotype might be in your head. Or a fragrance like, a note like, I don't know, cannabis, where you have a very set idea of what you think cannabis is going to smell like because, you may have smelt it somewhere, but then you realize the cannabis note is actually very different to what you probably think it is. So there's loads of things like that something like Fragrantica really helps you with.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource.
Yeah.
Do you think, Nick, with your work, do you think the landscape around grooming and fragrance for men is changing? Do you think we're getting more open in the way we talk about it, in the way that it's covered in the media and things like that? What's your experience these days in 2022?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I suppose I very much come from this angle in the fact that I read the kind of I contribute to the kind of publications that I guess talk about fragrance in this kind of very invested way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, if you're looking at if I go to my local Boots and look at the fragrances there, that's still the kind of place where it'll be very heavily, this is a masculine fragrance, gendered, this is a feminine fragrance. Yeah. These two are kept apart and they don't cross over. However, I think when it comes to, I think that it is getting less. I think that is getting less important to people. But I also think that actually more people are invested in having fragrances that make them feel good. And especially after the past few years where we've, through various lockdowns been sort of starved of contact with other people, but also been starved of experiencing different smells, as crazy as that sounds. I think a lot more people have become more interested in fragrance, not only for themselves, but also for the homes and the areas immediately around them. I know I certainly have, and I know that I'm totally geeky about that. And, I do put a lot of emphasis on having like scented candles
your rooms.
Around our house that are in different areas. So, but I feel that more people are more invested in that now.
And I think it goes hand in hand with, the whole movement over the last 10, 20 years around food and things. It's people wanting to know about provenance a bit more and what the ingredients are and how sustainable things are. I think all these things go hand in hand. No, I totally agree. I think, but I guess you are in a sort of rarefied position where you're immersed in the industry, and I think it's still, I don't know, people I talk to sometimes, there's still this, I don't know whether it's me sort of being particularly sensitive about it, but I think sometimes people still, when I'm talking to men about it, there's this feeling that it's somehow a sort of effeminate thing to spend too much time thinking about, which obviously I don't agree with. But then, why is it any more valid to have an interest in wine or cigars or cars or anything like that? It's I don't know. It's not going to change people's perceptions, instantly. But it's very interesting to hear your view on it.
Well, I would say one of the things that I really noticed when I was working at GQ, which is a few years ago now, so I imagine this is even more true now. But when we used to do, I did a whole series online of not only like best fragrance of the year and lists like that, which obviously do very well, but I did a whole series at one point, commissioned a whole series about that kind of broke down what different ingredients in fragrance were, why they're kind of used, and the best fragrances that use that note. So like we did, a guide to Neroli, a guide to bergamot, a guide to amber, and they did phenomenally well, traffic-wise.
It'd be really useful.
And I think that there are more men out there now that, want to, as you say, really get into what the provenance is of what they're wearing and learn more about it. And I think that that idea that it's something not to spend your time on, I think is not what the majority of men hold now. I think most guys want to find out about what they're and have a fragrance that they can talk about and that makes them feel great and confident at a time when it's very hard to, it's kind of even down to things like being in the workplace and feeling like you're the best version of yourself, because it's tricky to be in workplace at the moment. It's a tough job.
I think that encapsulates it perfectly, and it's kind of no more or less than wanting something that makes you feel good and smell good and be the best version of yourself. I think it's a perfect way of describing it. So Nick, you're in your 30s, am I right? So yes. I just in terms of how you feel about your appearance now, and it strikes me from the conversation we have, you're obviously very engaged in products and trying to do the best thing for your appearance. I mean, are you someone that's sort of comfortable in their skin? You know, when you look in the mirror, are you kind of you happy with what you see now? Or do you ever think, oh, there's something I'd like to change, or is that not in your thoughts at all?
I mean, I think I would say that, yeah. I mean, looking in the mirror, I'm happy. I think, you go through a few years wanting to look like, other people that are, infinitely maybe more handsome than you are. And you
Australian surfers with blonde hair.
Yeah, long hair. Or, waking up tomorrow to look at Jake Gyllenhaal. But, I think I come from a position where I've certainly when it comes to like grooming and things, like I really did struggle with my skin in my teenage years and then my early 20s. And I've also had issues with my eyes over the years. And I will say that another one of my grooming essentials is Celluvis 1% saline eye drops, which I always have a constant supply of.
Right.
But when you've been through anything that's like that, like having an issue with your eyes or an issue with your skin, that are both very visible manifestations of that can really dent your confidence. I'm very happy that I've got to a point where I can, manage both of those things. And there's always, I think, when now in my 30s, most of my maybe concerns about physical things are more from the point of view that, am I future-proofing my health at this stage? So, I've noticed over the past few years, for example, that I've started to get varicose veins in my legs. And that's not something that I'm really thinking of from an aesthetic point of view, but I am thinking that is probably something that I need to look into now in my 30s, because it's something that's going to future-proof my health moving forward.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably that's a concern of mine at the moment that I need to address, and I haven't done, and I probably should do very at some point soon.
And that you would have a procedure to remove the varicose veins, something like that.
Well, whatever's best for them, really.
Yeah,
I would say. I'm it's actually an area that I don't know a huge amount about. I know there are various treatments for it, but it's definitely something that I need to go and consult someone about. To learn more about the situation and see what can be done. So, but overall, very I've got my health and I'm happy.
Yeah, and I think, and as as cheesy as it sounds, I think the inner happiness and confidence that emanates, doesn't it? I think that gives people a good aura and an energy anyway. I think I would say but that links neatly to asking about things that make you happy. If I just, as simple as what makes you happy, Nick, what would that be?
Yeah, I think a question like that is obviously
it's big. It's big. I know
it's big, and there's kind of two ways to answer that. I suppose there's the glib answer and there's the actual answer. And the actual answer is obviously having.
Thank you. Go actual.
Well, we'll get that one first. So. Yeah, the actual answer is obviously, the people closest to me make me happy. My husband makes me happier than I ever thought I could be. We have a dog. He's ridiculous. He makes me very happy. And having, lived through the past couple of years with the pandemic, we got married in 2019 and made a plan to move and live with my parents. In order to kind of prepare for trying to get our own place. And of course, no one had thought about the pandemic when we started making that plan in January and handed our notice in our place in London. However, by the time we actually moved back, which was set for 6 months after that, which was after the first lockdown had literally just lifted, that plan had become something very, very different. And we've now lived out with my parents for 2 years, and at a time when not many people had the opportunity to see their loved ones, certainly see their parents for a lot of the last couple of years. I feel very, very lucky that I've managed to spend that couple of years with my parents, seeing them every day, and of course that makes me incredibly happy.
I'm sure it's not without its challenges, but like you say, that's fantastic to be able, where so many people have had all that distance, then you were able to be with them all the time. That's amazing.
Exactly, and that's families, right? Like,
yeah. But making that work in the same house is no mean feat. So there's obviously a lovely bond there if that's working well for you guys. Yeah,
exactly. And they're obviously fantastic with the dogs. That's brilliant as well. So Albie is happier than anyone. Our dog.
He gets lots of people walking him and looking after him.
Exactly. And then of course on top of that, I have a really close group of friends who make me happy as well. But what I will say is that the slightly more, I suppose, glib answer to that question is links to that in some way. It's like getting out and about makes me happy. The idea of being able to socialize my friends in places outside of work and home makes me very happy. So getting to go to nice restaurants which are now reopened made me very happy. And going to the theatre makes me very happy. My husband actually works in the theatre world, and so we've had a couple of years of not going to theatre very much, and now we're getting out and about, going to see things, which is really fantastic.
And that must have been really difficult for him as well, because there must have been a period where, well, I don't know in what capacity, but it was so challenging, wasn't it, for the whole it's been arts and creative sector.
It has been rather a challenging couple of years. I mean, he's handled it obviously fantastically, but I think it's been a really challenging couple of years. But I mean, my other answer would be, I'm a big fan of listening to Desert Island Discs, and that they have like, what's your luxury that you take away on your desert island with you?
Yeah.
And so my ultra glib answer to this, which would be my answer on Desert Island Discs, when you're on, when they come to you, when I'm on, I think this is Desert Island Discs. I don't think I'm actually going on Desert Island Discs anytime soon. I'm sharing it now.
Do it now. Yeah,
they say what your luxury is, and I can never quite decide what my luxury is. But two things that make me genuinely very happy that are consumables, that always bring a bit of a smile to my face, are either sparkling water or whipped cream. I absolutely love whipped cream.
I didn't think you'd say those.
Yeah. However, I feel that on a desert island, whipped cream would be a poor choice.
Yeah.
I just think that's going to curdle.
Wouldn't
really
keep
quickly.
Well.
Yeah, it doesn't, and you're not going to fancy it on a desert island. Like, what are you going to put it on?
Cloying.
Yeah. So no, those are my two things that, in a glib way, make me very happy. But I do genuinely love sparkling water. I'm quite obsessed with fizzy water, and I would rather have that most times than most other drinks. So those are my sort of sillier glib answers to that. Sparkling water.
It's a really good insight. So if you were out with friends and your husband and your dog in a really nice cafe drinking sparkling water, you'd be happy as anything.
Yeah, I'd probably have a glass of wine as well. But yeah.
Yeah. It's not pure abstinence. Oh, Nick, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And I really appreciate the fact that, there's so many fantastic products that you obviously use and taken time to talk through and talk about the benefits. It's, it's exactly what this podcast is all about. Thank you so much. You take care, and we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to chat. So hopefully see you in real life at some point in the near future.
You will. Thanks, Nick.
Bye.
It was so good to spend some time with Nick, and I think he had some fantastic suggestions. Some brands I knew, some that I didn't. So what I'll do is put them in the show notes. So if you want to find out more, you can do. If you want to find Nick on the socials, he's on Instagram at Nick Carvell, which is NickCarvell. Thanks to Nick, and thanks to you for joining me, and I'll see you next time on Man in the Mirror.